So I'll just say this, that Cincinnati was the first group to bring this Mondragon United Steelworker vision into reality, and that vision really is this: you're creating this interconnected network. You are creating union co-ops, so you have the power of labor, which we see as really important for a lot of reasons. One is that the solidarity consciousness needed to make this network work, it can be found in the best practices of the labor movement. So that's one of them, but there's a lot of varieties of things. There's really nice health benefits too, that's cool. But all sorts of lovely things there. We've also been able to advocate on the Farm Bill and things because the United Food and Commercial Workers represents our first co-op, which is Our Harvest, which is a farm and food hub co-op that's been around for 7 years now. And interestingly, the UFCW approached us to ask, what would we like to see in the Farm Bill? It's like, oh, we got a lot of ideas. And just kind of how interesting that this itty bitty place in Cincinnati with 11 workers was able to have our voice represented by this more forceful kind of a group. So I think there's a variety of really interesting things that are there. But beyond that, so I would just say in our ecosystem in Cincinnati, we have a serious focus on education. So you see that we meet every week with all of our workers. We meet on the job site. We are really deeply building those types of financial intelligence, emotional intelligence really too, business intelligence. That's like a very concerted effort. We also meet with the CEOs or the head management folks to help problem solve each week. So there's a lot of support around this, a lot of investment in people. We have some existing co-ops. I mentioned Our Harvest. We have Sustainergy, which is a residential insulation and mold remediation co-op. That's a cool one. We have this thing called CareShare, and that one is represented by the Steelworkers. CareShare is actually represented by the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers, and it's actually in the space of childcare, and it's a cool one. Apple Street Market is this project we've been working on for years to put a full-service grocery store in a food desert, and we just had an awful setback. We were about to go to construction in March, and at the end of January, because we're using this thing called new market tax credits to make this happen, because it's a $4.8 million project, PNC pulled out. They were a new market tax credit investor. They pulled out at the end of January because they realized due to tax reform that they had overinvested in tax credits in 2018, so they were canceling their projects all across the U.S. And so now that was bringing $1.5 million of equity into our project. So we are now trying to raise all that. I mean, we had everything's ready, everything's been permitted. We're like, anyway, it's a bummer, but we're working on it. All right, so we have this immigrant co-op that's actually all these Guatemalan immigrants that is going to be launching in June, which is a cleaning co-op. We have something called Co-op U, which is this 12-week co-op boot camp that uses Mondragon's cooperative incubator, some of their best practices, along with lean startup, so it's really hands-on and iterative. That begins again on April 16th, and there's 5 local groups going through that. We also have a loan fund that we get to be a part of because there's this financial cooperative that exists across the country, and we're able to tap into that. We also have something called renting partnerships. I'm just throwing all this out there in case you want to ask questions about it. Renting partnerships is a really innovative way of doing affordable housing where people actually, this is a nonprofit that's a part of our group, not a co-op, but an innovative way of doing affordable housing where people actually build financial equity as well as deep levels of community in the process. And they have created right now a real estate investment co-op called Dividend Housing that is a way of reinvesting in disinvested communities in a way that doesn't lead to gentrification because you can keep rents where they need to be for the majority of people in Cincinnati, which is people that make between $20,000 and $35,000. So it's a really, really cool kind of a thing. And the other thing that we focus on and are working with a number of companies of existing owners who are wanting to transition their business to their employees. So facilitating that process. Okay, 2 quick last things. We also have policy. We do a lot with different things on policy. in our city, and we have some exciting policies that will benefit co-ops kind of underway at the moment. And I'm happy to talk about that. And finally, we have something that all of you are invited to in November 15th and 16th called the Union Co-op Symposium. And this is where groups of people who are already bringing this to life in their city or are considering bringing it to life come. We have a lovely group of people from Mondragon. We have all kinds of people that are doing this. It's a very practical, fun 2 days. So
but even more specifically, there was roughly about 10 years of concentrated study and development around looking at that co-op development all over the world for both positive and negatives before we even got to a point of launching Cooperation Jackson. And in many respects, our launch was actually somewhat premature. In that the plan that we had laid out, and you can read elements of this plan, it's called the Jackson-Cush Plan, which we kind of put out publicly roughly in 2012, but we started talking about it roughly about 2008. And that plan has kind of like three components of like building power in a very concentrated way to do some very deliberate things politically and economically. So one is building people's assemblies as like an instrument of broad kind of constituent-based people's power being kind of the leading engine driving this. The second was what we call independent political politics, electoral politics, coming and being directed from this people's assembly. And then the third one, which is the area in which we fit in, was trying to build a very active and dynamic solidarity economy, primarily on a municipal level. And that was for some very specific reasons in our context, which I'll try to contrast in a minute. What I understand, and folks can correct me, the difference between our context in Mississippi and here, because there's some similarities, but then there's also some profound differences. And then how do you relate to that, I think, winds up being a key question to look at, right? So over the course of this 5 years, where we have kind of concrete landed after a bunch of good starts, failures, some good starts, and things continue to move forward. There's a urban farming cooperative called Freedom Farms. There's a lawn care cooperative called the Green Team. There's our newly opened community production co-op, which is a small scale digital fabrication factory, if you would. That's kind of emerging, developing. And then we have a ever-growing land trust. And for us, the land trust is really, in many respects, the driving force, the economic engine, the foundation for us. And what we very intentionally and strategically tried to do was to occupy as much land as possible in our community and to take it off of the speculative market, because gentrification is coming, is being driven primarily by an expanding medical corridor, a process that got set in motion shortly after Hurricane Katrina, when our governor, Haley Barbour, really kind of looked at the model of what was going on in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina as being a kind of a major economic engine, but also a way to reorganize your city, right? And so in New Orleans, that's been used as a major source of cleansing the city of large sectors of its black working class to create a new city. And that was by design, and it's also by design in our case, right? So for us, we started with this kind of imperative of like the broader political project of which we are part of is really dependent upon certain demographic factors that we think are both in our favor, at least to kind of try the vision that we have. So what I mean by that, Jackson is 80% black, right? It's roughly 200,000 people. It's a deeply impoverished city. Roughly 40% of the city is at or below the poverty, the noted poverty line in the city, and unemployment is more than rampant. And what that, into the reverse of that, is what that enables is folks very hungry for change outside of the box, right? And exploration and wanting to try new ideas, because clearly the standard way of doing things is not working, and you don't have to convince anybody of that. It's more a question of, okay, what can work given the resources that we have and given the skill levels that we have. And that is where we try to come in and say, given our history and given our locality, nobody's coming to save us at this point. So what can we do? Look at each other, stare at each other in the face. What can we do to transform the situation given our own energy, will, and resources?